The abnormal roar of a forklift engine and the screech of tires burning against the concrete floor tore through the warehouse's silence. I looked up just in time to see the machine fly past, missing a packing clerk by mere inches. Parcels shattered everywhere in a deafening crash. In the driver's seat was Kevin, Linda's brother, and the CEO's brother-in-law. He was wearing AirPods, clutching an open beer can, and his face flushed red as he laughed like he was playing a video game. Without a second thought, I lunged forward, killed the engine, and ripped the key from the ignition. "Kevin, what the hell are you doing?" I barked. "You aren't certified, and more importantly, you're intoxicated behind the wheel. Get down now before you cause an irreversible catastrophe." Kevin popped an earbud out and smirked at me with pure indifference. "Chill out, old man. Stop playing the hero. My brother-in-law owns this place. I can drive whatever I want. Give me the keys, unless you want me to call my sister in here." In the heat of the moment, the sharp click of high heels on the floor signaled Linda's arrival. Instead of screaming like a typical Karen, she approached with a terrifying calmness, her eyes dripping with disdain. She placed a hand on Kevin's shoulder and turned to me. Her voice smooth but razor sharp. "Mark, why are you raising your voice at my brother in front of the other workers? We are a family here, and family is supposed to protect each other, not bully the vulnerable just to flex some pathetic little bit of power." I was stunned by her gaslighting. OSHA safety regulations aren't bullying. "Linda, Kevin almost caused a fatal accident." Linda smiled a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Regulations are written by men. Mark, loyalty is not. You're disrupting our workflow and costing us money." Just then, Robert, the CEO, stepped down from the mezzanine office. Linda's demeanor shifted instantly. She clung to her husband's arm, playing the victim. "Robert, look, Mark is giving my brother a hard time again. He makes me feel like our family isn't even respected in your own company." Robert glared at me, completely ignoring the wreckage and the beer can in Kevin's hand. He delivered a line that made my blood boil. "Mark, I pay you to run this warehouse, not to educate my family. I don't care if you're technically right or wrong. I care about your attitude. My office. Now, and bring your badge. We need to discuss whether you truly belong in this family anymore. I'm Mark. If you saw me on the street, you'd see a quiet, middle-aged guy in a faded reflective vest, clutching a stack of technical inspection files. In Robert's eyes, I was just a high-level hire who happened to be there since day one. But there was one thing his arrogance blinded him to. I don't just run this warehouse. I am the system that keeps it from collapsing. With 15 years in the logistics industry, I possess something that money can't buy. In a hurry. A federal safety, U.S. DOT license registered in my personal name. For the past 5 years, Roberts Corporation has operated solely on my credentials and reputation. I'm the only one with deep-rooted connections to the owner-operators, the guys who trust my word. Not the empty promises of a CEO sitting in an air-conditioned office. I plan to stay here until retirement. But Linda and Kevin's arrival forced me to open the drawer containing the contingency plan I never wanted to touch. The heavy oak door of the conference room slammed shut, completely sealing off the chaos of the warehouse outside. Robert sat perched at the head of the table like a king preparing to pass a death sentence on a lowly servant. Beside him, Linda calmly sipped her tea. Her eyes locked on me with a triumphant gleam. Robert didn't waste time with a greeting. He slid a glossy polymer sheet across the table toward me. "Sign it, Mark. This is your one and only way out," Robert said coldly. I glanced at the header. Disciplinary agreement and admission of unprofessional conduct. And the content was a venomous career trap. It would force me to admit to harassing and threatening Linda and to acting with professional incompetence. Robert drummed his fingers on the table, his voice dripping with intimidation. My wife was terrified after what happened on the floor. "If you sign this and give Linda a public apology in front of the entire company tomorrow morning, I'll treat this as a temporary lapse in judgment due to work stress. Otherwise, I'm firing you immediately with a formal harassment charge. You know how small this industry is. Mark, once a harassment mark hits your federal record, no company from the East Coast to the West will touch you. Your career will go up in smoke in a heartbeat." I looked into Robert's eyes, trying to find a trace of the friend who used to pull all-nighters with me during the early days of the startup. But there was nothing left, only a man blinded by power and his wife's manipulation. Linda smirked, a bone-chillingly satisfied grin. "You see, Mark, we're a family here. But that's a reward reserved only for those who know how to obey. I didn't feel a shred of fear, and I didn't bother explaining the safety regulations they had willfully trampled on. I slowly pulled my phone from my pocket, my fingers moving quickly across the screen to hit send on an email I'd had sitting in my drafts for a long time. The truth was, from the day Linda brought Kevin into the company, I smelled the rot. I had secretly hired my own lawyer to review my subcontracting agreements and found a loophole regarding the DOT safety license that Robert had carelessly signed off on years ago. I wasn't preparing to betray them. I was preparing to save myself for the moment Robert's family decided to make me their sacrificial lamb. As I pressed send, my hand trembled slightly. Not from fear, but because I knew I was personally signing the death warrant for an empire I had spent my youth building. "I'm not signing a thing, Robert," I said, my voice so calm it even surprised me. "And you won't get the chance to fire me either, because I just submitted my resignation, effective immediately. But there's something you should know before I walk out that door." Robert raised an eyebrow, about to interrupt, but I pushed forward. In that email, I also officially notified the Department of Transportation, DOT, to trigger the owner fault termination clause, in case you've forgotten. Your entire 500 truck fleet is currently operating under a safety license in my personal name. As of this second, every single one of this corporation's trucks on the road is illegal and no longer covered by insurance. Good luck with the mess your family just created. I stood up, ripped the badge from my chest that I'd worn for half a decade, and tossed it into the trash can in the corner. Without a single look back, I walked out of the room, leaving behind Robert, his face pale as a ghost, and the sudden, frantic ringing of his phone. The calls from the legal department had already begun. I walked out of the corporate headquarters, breathing in the air of freedom for the first time in 5 years. But behind me, a financial storm was brewing, one that Robert lacked the skills to weather. His fatal mistake was viewing me as a replaceable cog, forgetting that I was the one holding the passport for his entire empire. In the United States, the trucking industry runs on federal trust. All 500 of the corporation's trucks were hitting the asphalt based on the safety US DOT license registered in my name. The moment my notification email to the Department of Transportation DOT was confirmed, Robert's entire fleet legally became ghosts, operating illegally on every highway in the country. Just 2 hours after my departure, Linda, with her blind overconfidence, appointed Kevin to take my place. Desperate to offset the chaos and prove the power of their nepotism, Kevin began ordering drivers to blow past their regulated hours, committing flagrant violations of ELD electronic logging device laws. He didn't realize that in this industry, cutting corners on driver rest periods is legal suicide. The first explosion hit at 4 p.m. One of our veteran drivers was pulled over by state troopers at a way station in Ohio. When the officers scanned the DOT code, the system flashed red safety license suspended. The truck was immediately impounded on the spot. But that wasn't even the worst part. When the insurance company received word of the incident, they conducted an emergency audit of the management records and discovered Kevin, a man with 0 professional certifications, running the show in my stead. The result was a total catastrophe. The insurance provider immediately canceled the policy, citing a violation of risk management provisions. Losing insurance meant Robert's empire was officially dead in the water. Industry giants like Amazon and Walmart use automated scanning systems that are incredibly strict, within 30 minutes of the insurance cancellation. Emergency contract termination notices began raining down on Robert's office like a monsoon. Billion-dollar contracts evaporated in a single afternoon. Word spread like wildfire through the trucking community. And the owner-operators who only ever worked there because they trusted me collectively shut off their engines and turned their rigs around. On the stock market, the corporation's share price entered a terminal free fall. Robert and Linda wanted to put family above everything else. And now, that very family was sinking together into the bottomless abyss of an unsalvageable bankruptcy. 3 days after I walked out, Robert's world collapsed faster than anyone could have imagined. But instead of a bankruptcy filing, I received a phone call in the middle of the night. Robert's voice was stripped of its usual arrogance. It was trembling, broken, and filled with utter despair. "Mark, I'm so sorry. Linda and Kevin have ruined everything. The company is burning down and you're the only one who can put out the fire. For the sake of our friendship from the early days, please come to the office one last time." I'll sign whatever you want. Just please, save my life's work. I tossed and turned all night, even though they had humiliated me. I couldn't bear to watch the empire I'd spent 5 years building go up in smoke. The next morning, I walked into the corporate headquarters with the intention of lending Robert a hand to stabilize the situation before I truly moved on. But as I stepped into the lobby, there was no handshake of reconciliation. 2 police officers suddenly emerged from the shadows, blocking my path. Robert descended the stairs, his face devoid of the desperation he had shown the night before. Instead, he wore a venomous smirk and a gaze filled with murderous intent. Linda stood beside him, clutching a folder, looking as triumphant as a hunter who had just bagged their prey. "You're so naive." "Mark," Robert laughed, his voice echoing through the lobby. "You really thought I'd just hand this company over to you? The police are here to arrest you for sabotaging our security systems and stealing trade secrets. I've already filed a lawsuit against you in federal court. You're going to rot in prison before you ever see that damn license of yours do you any good." Linda curled her lip in sheer contempt. "Thank you for walking straight into your own arrest. You really are just a stupid hired hand with cheap compassion." My heart sank, not out of fear, but out of pure disgust. It turned out my kindness was the very weapon they used to stab me in the back once again. I looked at Robert, the man I used to share cheap beers with when we first started out, now transformed into a monster completely corrupted by power. "You're right, Robert. I was naive to believe you had a shred of humanity left," I said. "I never imagined you could sink this low." The cold steel of the handcuffs snapped shut around my wrists right in the middle of the lobby. Robert looked at me with the manic eyes of a man who thought he had just reclaimed his kingdom. He leaned in close to my ear, whispering in a voice dripping with triumph. "You lost. Mark, I'm going to use every connection I have to make sure you rot in prison. Thanks for the stupid kindness that brought you here to surrender." Linda stood by, nonchalantly taking photos on her phone as I was being led away. "Take him away, officer," she sneered. "People like this don't deserve a place in this society." I said nothing, keeping my head down as I walked. In that moment, I felt a genuine flicker of fear. Robert wasn't simple. He had prepared forged documents and bribed witnesses to frame me. If I couldn't trigger my plan inside that police station, but it would be game over at the interrogation room. Robert and his private attorney sat across from me. He confidently pushed a folder of evidence-forged logs claiming I had wiped the system data toward the investigator. "I'd like to begin my statement," I said, calmly cutting Robert off as he rambled on about my alleged crimes. "And I have crucial evidence to surrender. It's on the USB drive in my front shirt pocket." And the officer took the drive and plugged it into the computer. Robert smirked. "What are you turning in souvenir photos?" But his grin froze as the screen flickered to life. It wasn't system data. It was the dashcam footage from the very forklift Kevin had been driving. "This is the newest line of forklifts the company just brought in," I explained to the investigator. "It features a 360-degree safety camera system that automatically records video and audio during collisions or improper operation. This data is uploaded directly to the manufacturer's cloud for insurance purposes. Robert has no power to delete it." "Do you hear that?" From the speakers, Kevin's shouting echoed clearly, followed by Linda barking orders at employees to cover for her brother. And then came the smoking gun, Robert's own voice. "Just forge the safety reports. I'll sign off on them." "Mark can't do a damn thing to us." The investigator frowned, looking at Robert with a completely different expression. Just then, my lawyer entered the room. But he wasn't alone. He handed the officer an emergency fax. "Officer, I represent the creditors and 3 members of the board of directors. They aren't here in person, but they received a copy of this data via email the moment my client was illegally detained. They have held an emergency vote to terminate Robert for federal insurance fraud and endangering corporate assets. This is the official removal order." Robert collapsed into his chair, his hands trembling. It turned out I had configured the forklift manufacturer's system to send an alert with the evidence to the entire board if anyone attempted an unauthorized override to wipe the data. Robert thought he was trapping me, but in reality, he was confessing to the very people who held his fate in their hands. When the procedures at the station were finalized, the board representative looked at me with desperation. "Mark, we know you've faced grave injustice, but the company is on the brink of collapse. If you don't step in, Hundreds of drivers will lose their jobs tomorrow because there's no insurance and no license. We need you to come back not as an employee, but as the CEO. I stared out the window in silence. I had only wanted justice for myself, but the thought of those drivers, my brothers, losing their livelihoods was something I couldn't turn my back on. I nodded, but with one condition: Robert had to be cleared of his massive personal debts in exchange for transferring his shares to me. I didn't want to seize the company. I wanted to save a sinking ship. 2 hours later, I walked out of the station a free man. The next morning, I returned to the CEO's office. Robert and Linda were there, hollow-eyed, packing up their last luxury items. Linda glared at me with pure hatred, but Robert just kept his head down. "You won, Mark. You took everything," Robert said bitterly. I looked him straight in the eye, my voice steady. "I didn't take anything from you, Robert. In fact, I just signed an agreement to take on the personal debt you secured using your mansion as collateral. Without this deal, your family wouldn't have a roof over their heads tonight. I didn't do this for you. I did it for the friendship we once had, and because I need this company stable to protect the jobs of the hundreds of employees out there. You broke this place just to please Linda. I'm the one trying to fix it," as security escorted them out of the building. I didn't sit in the CEO chair to enjoy the victory. I picked up the dispatch radio, took a deep breath, and broadcasted to the entire company. "Attention everyone, and this is Mark. I'm back. The safety license has been restored, and the insurance is active. You are cleared to start your engines. From this day forward, we aren't a toxic nepotism shop anymore. We are a professional team that respects one another. Welcome back." After my final announcement echoed through the radio system, a heavy silence hung over the warehouse for a few seconds. Then, suddenly, it erupted with the cheers of the drivers. I looked down at the yard from the CEO's office, watching the massive trucks begin to puff white smoke, gearing up for the safe journeys ahead. Robert and Linda were gone. I heard that they later had to sell off their remaining assets just to cover the DOT fines and legal fees. As for Kevin, he was permanently stripped of his right to operate heavy machinery. I didn't feel a surge of joy at their failure, but I did feel a profound sense of relief that justice had finally been served. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out my old name badge, the one I had tossed into the trash just days before. I didn't pin it back on my chest. Instead, I placed it prominently on the desk as a constant reminder. Real power doesn't come from a title or a bloodline. It comes from respect, ethics, and the value we create for others. The old chapter closed with betrayal and tears, but a new one had begun, and this time, it would be built on integrity. I'm Mark, and this is how I reclaimed what was mine.